Alright folks, so in this video I'm going to discuss the ethical dilemma behind the trolley problem. I'm sure everybody has heard of this story. So, there you have a cartel with 5 people coming at you. Unless you do something, these 5 people are going to die. But if you pull the switch and divert the track, then another person will die. So it's 5 versus 1. So what's the most ethical decision? Well, back in the day, people actually made these kind of choices all the time, and many of these there were crimes against humanity. Have you ever heard of the term senicide? Homicide against seniors. It's practiced in many parts of the world, and I honestly think that it was the worst in the European countries. This happened during the Vikings age. The Romans and the Greeks, they all did very similar things. Do you know what they used to do back in the medieval times? They used to push old people off of cliffs. No, I'm serious. You can look this up. This was a very common widespread throughout Scandinavia back in the Middle Ages. So what happens is, for example, back in the ancient times when people were very poor, now that your good old grandpa, he's turned 60, he says, oh, you know what? I'm too tired to work on the field, to grow crops, to put in the hours. I'm going to go enjoy my retirement. Well, you think life is that simple? Guess what? The whole family's got to eat. And then now you're not working, you're not helping with food production, you're not putting in any work. So, but we still have to feed you. You go from being an asset to the society to becoming a burden. So what did these civilizations do way back in the day? They lined them up on the top of a cliff and they pushed them off one by one. And I think society keeps focusing on, slavery. They want to focus on that one tiny little aspect about white people enslaving black people. But listen, slavery was practiced worldwide. It's still being practiced in many parts of Africa today. Okay, for all those people bitching about climate change, your iPhone, where do you think that comes from? You said, oh, you want to switch to electric vehicles. Where do you think Tesla gets their lithium and the cobalt from? It comes from the mines of Congo. And look up these Congolese mines. Most of the people working there are young women and children. They're being exploited for cheap labor. In fact, many of these children, they don't get paid at all. And all of the chemicals coming out of these mines where they're digging up these cobalt and lithium, they're extremely toxic. They're giving no protection. They have no health insurance. And many of these children, they will die of cancer before they turn 30 or 40. That's where you get your iPhone from, okay? So every single person who is a climate activist, they're all full of shit. Look at Steven Spielberg, one of the most prominent and famous climate activists out there. He flies in a private plane every single day. Just one flight will produce more carbon emission versus the average citizen driving during his or her entire lifetime of 80 years. They're all full of shit. And you have to understand, history is brutal, okay? It's not just, white people pushing old people off of cliffs, okay? You want to talk about the Native Americans? Screw the Native Americans. Every time I go to a class, they say, oh, we had to acknowledge the land that's sitting on the Algonquin Native Nations. Okay, listen, if you live in Canada, go to Northern Ontario, go to Kenora, go to the prairies, go to Alberta, go to BC. Do you know what is consistently ranked as the most dangerous highway in the world? It's in British Columbia of Canada, highway number 7. On highway 7, tens and thousands of indigenous women, they're being murdered by indigenous males every single year. The government never mentions that, okay? The Native American communities, they look down on women, they commit child infanticide if the baby is born a female. You subjugate women, you rape women every single day. Like I said, if you don't believe me, go to Northern Ontario, go to those small communities, go to the native reserves. Many women there are being raped every single day by native men. You do nothing about it. So why the hell should I respect the Native American community, okay? History is very complicated. So to all the Indian people out there, that's absolutely, hating on the UK and the colonization of India. When the British first arrived in India, their population was 170 million. By the time the British left in 1947, the population of India rose to 430 million. Did you know that back in the ancient times, the Indians will also regularly commit child infanticide? Because they were extremely misogynistic society. And every time a woman will give birth to a little baby girl, they look at it, it says, oh, no penis, boom, they kill the baby. The parents would do it. It was the British that came in that stopped this practice in India, okay? Do you know what the Native Americans used to do this? In fact, they still might do this in northern Canada, okay? When people get old, okay, whether it's a man or a woman, okay, so they're no longer able to hunt for food. They're no longer able to provide for their families. They're no longer able to contribute to the community. Do you think the younger generation will actually be kind and take over and take care of them? No. Do you know what they tell the seniors to do in the native communities? They tell them to walk alone onto the ice sheets, where they will never ever be seen again. That's history for you. And this is what they need to teach in classrooms because all of these people are so full of shit. They're all trying to push an agenda, okay? To people say that the evil white man came over to North America and we massacred tens of millions of Native Americans. Well, some of that is true, I agree. But do you also know that back in Native America, this is before the European colonizers showed up, massive genocides were being committed on a daily basis from tribe to tribe. The Native Americans, they were by far the most violent, the most vicious civilization in the history of the world. Cannibalism was regularly practiced, and child infanticide was extremely common. And back 500 years ago, when Christopher Columbus, when he first arrived, the average life expectancy of a Native American was roughly anywhere between 35 to 40 years old. Today in Canada, it's around 75 years old, okay? Sure, it's still below the national average. There are a lot of reasons for this, like the one I mentioned. The fact that they're still actively raping and killing women, and the government never mentions this. So if you want to talk about, the trolley problem, the ethic dilemma, you need to cover every single aspect of it. Because nowadays, the school media, they're pushing 100% BS propaganda that doesn't benefit anybody. It's 100% indoctrination. History is brutal, it's complicated, it's not black and white. White people committed horrific acts of crimes against humanity. So did the black people. Chinese people committed horrific acts of crimes against humanity as well. So did Indian people. So did Native Americans. None of us are innocent. It's important that we learn this, but it's also extremely important to remember that we cannot be held for the sins of our ancestors. And I will say this again, as someone who is about to graduate from university in the West. Do not go to university. It's doing way more harm versus good. As a young man, I think the best option for you, if you want to make some real cash, is to go to trade school.